Welcome to another edition of Learning Strategies with no other than Kate Benson. Kate Benson is the International Director for Education of the Society of NLP for Neuro-Linguistic Programming, and she knows everything about learning strategies. The topic for today is how are your questioning skills? We're going to question your questioning skills. Everyone, warm welcome. Good to see Katelijne, Yvonne. And of course, we also want to see Kate. Where is Kate? There she is. Welcome, Kate.
Hello, Joost.
How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Yes, much better than last week.
Oh, what was the matter last week?
Oh, more tax office issues. So we're reasonably doing okay today. Hi, Jane. Good to see you.
Hello, Jane.
So, and how was your week?
Oh, chaotic.
Okay, did you go to the school and do the stuff we did last week?
No, I haven't done that yet. I'm waiting for a date for that. I thought it was going to be last week, and then of course I got completely confused because it was not Easter, bank holiday.
Yeah,
they were off or something. So, no, I'm going soon.
good
To do what?
Well,
Yes,
keep us
and
posted.
yeah. So I've had a week of builders and all sorts of rubbish.
Okay, yes,
Trouble and strife.
okay, yes. Now we were busy decorating our living room, and then we found a big wall of asbestos. Is it asbestos?
Oh, asbestos. Oh, we have
Yeah,
that problem.
asbestos.
Yeah, lovely.
Yeah, so we're now waiting for the permit to get it removed.
Yes, every time we to do something like that, we always fear in this big old house that we're going to. But I've got builders in all over. Everything's just completely chaos. I've got little pockets of sanctuaries around the house where I can just escape to.
Right, like this hour.
Like this hour, yeah, exactly that. This is my little sanctuary for the next. I daren't show you what's beyond here because that's a bit chaotic, but at least this bit's a bit organized.
Excellent.
So yeah, it'll be good. It's all good fun.
Yes, wonderful. So, and we're going to talk about questions.
We are, but actually we're going to talk about questions in a different way from I think even you and I have had discussions about before, Joost.
Well, I looked at the sheets that you sent to me so I can put them on whenever you want to, and they were a complete mystery to me. I was going, what? I have no clue what this is going to be. So I'm very much interested to discover where this mystery tour is going to take us.
Yes. Well, I know that we mentioned a couple of weeks ago about how we use in teaching excellence, we use Bloom's and the meta model combined for questioning.
Yes.
But I didn't want to start there because, and we all know, well, some people will know, most people who are here, I think, have done at least a practitioner or a little bit of awareness of NLP, although people watching might not do.
About half of them have.
Okay, so let's start. Let's just back up a little bit then. So, questioning is a big part of NLP. We use the meta model questions to challenge people's thinking and their beliefs. So, a belief is just a big thought, really. So, I might think my neighbour's a bit annoying because they did something.
Your neighbours are a bit annoying.
Yeah. Actually, my neighbours are all lovely, but let's imagine that one of them was. So I might imagine that my neighbour does something, it's a bit annoying, and I think, oh, they're a bit annoying today. And that's a thought. If I then move that to my neighbour's a horrible person, that becomes a belief. So really, a belief is only just a big thought.
Yeah.
Or bigger, more permanent, more fixed.
But the my neighbors are annoying is also already a belief, right?
Oh yes, it's a belief, yes, but it's a smaller belief, if you like, than the, so they chunk up, don't they? Beliefs, so they end up as like values, which are huge, but little. Some are just little thoughts, and then they grow into big beliefs and big values. And we use the meta model to challenge those, to challenge people's thinking.
It looks to me that the only difference in the neighbors are annoying and the neighbors are annoying persons is that you make bigger pictures. You say you make a big belief, but you just make a bigger picture.
You might, That's how you make the belief bigger, I guess.
That's how you make the pictures bigger.
Well, okay. All right. Let's not go veering off here. We're still talking about questions. I'm just giving you my rationale for what we're doing today.
Good.
So we use this. Now, one of the things that I've noticed in NLP when we're especially at practitioner level, from an educational point of view, sometimes it's a bit back to front in that we teach quite small chunks first.
Mm-hmm.
So we teach detail often because NLP is a lot of detail. It's a lot about detail. It's about very minutiae of communication, so it's natural that we teach that.
Yes.
And it's not really later that we move to like a bigger picture, using your metaphor, a bigger picture about why are we doing something, or what is it for, or what's the purpose of something. And I was thinking today, I was thinking this week when I was thinking about what to do, because you know what I'm like, I'm a type 7, so I get bored really easily. So I need to change what I do quite regularly.
Of course.
I'm not one of these people who can do the same thing year in, year out without, I have to change.
Consistency.
Consistency is good, but also improvement is better.
Improvement's also good.
Constant improvement. Yeah.
I only have the Dutch version, but I'm going to put on the screen my brilliant ABC NLP model, which shows all the little details of neurolinguistic programming, going from the TOTI model all the way to all the basic NLP presuppositions.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, it's a really good model, and you really ought to make that in English.
That isn't. I have it in English.
Oh, okay. So my thinking was this. So I was thinking, okay, so let's think about like the meta position of questions, if you like. What are they for? Why are we doing it? What's the purpose behind them all? And this made me think. I was on a seminar with Richard Bandler a few years ago now. And I can't remember what the whole title was, but it was something learning strategies. Mm-hmm. He was like, oh, you've got to come to this, Kate, because I'm doing learning strategies. So I went. And actually, it was a real classic lesson in what Richard does, in that he tailored the whole workshop to the audience in front of them. And actually, they didn't have enough NLP to really get to the strategies.
Right.
The first time. We did it again the second time, and we did get some way to the strategies then. But the really key thing for me was what was the first part of this seminar, where Richard actually laid out how he made the choices as to what to do next, or what strategies. A belief is only a big thought. Popped up on the screen.
Yes,
I think so. That's my definition of it. You know, I like things very simple. Belief is just a big thought. Yes, and or a big picture, Joost would say. But I thought
it's also, of course, that once you make the picture bigger, then your feeling of certainty increases. So you feel more certain about it. And that's and the combination of the thought, the picture, and the feeling of certainty, that creates the belief.
So what Richard did on this seminar was very interesting, because as I said, I wasn't criticizing saying we didn't get to the learning strategies, because actually what needed to do is people needed to learn what they needed to learn on the seminar, which was great. And it was a classic case of that wonderful experience you really only have with Richard, I think, where it's so multi-layered. Right. Everybody gets something.
Yes.
And the most of the audience, especially the beginners, if you like, the all-comers, were sitting there in their usual sort of like glazed out, sort of like admiring, slightly very hypnotized state.
Right.
And all the assisting team were writing, scribbling like crazy at the back of the room, because Richard was laying out stuff that we never heard him lay out before, which was really about how he made the decisions that he made as to where to go with a particular client.
Right.
And you and I both had this thing where we've seen him with the demo subject, and I've sat there and gone like, how did he know to do that?
Yes.
How did he know to go down that particular path at that? And he hardly ever does what the rest of us have to do. Well, I said, is to set off and then go, actually, that's not the right way, back up, go down a different route.
Yes.
So he laid out this. Now, I couldn't possibly teach you what he laid out because it was so dense, and I would love to sort of sit through that about 4 or 5 times again, because
sometimes I'm not claiming anywhere near Richard's level of expertise, but sometimes I'm lucky, and that. So, for instance, I have this student in the prep course, and she has been doing NLP with one of my coaches, and she was talking about that she every time that she needed to do an exercise, she would block. And I was doing on the side one-on-one coaching with her because she was really upset about it. And then I was trying to find good situations, and and then often I start talking about parties, birthday parties, New Year's Day, stuff like that. And if that doesn't work, I move to sports. And have you ever had and then it turned out that she was big in sports. And then she explained to me that she was doing athletics, running and jumping and stuff like that. And the way that she described it to me, and then she said, yeah, and at one point I got injured. I was coming back too early. I was doing a high jump, and then I blocked. And the way she said it was the exact same intonation as she did with with blocking in the exercises. So that's a still ongoing project.
Oh, where have you gone?
I'm back.
Hello? What happened?
Yes, we're back again.
What happened?
There was a small. The universe did not like me telling this story about. But that is just I think a bit of luck, and also that we have, if we can't find good states, then we have to dig deeper in the past, and then sporting events often happen to have good states. But
and you
doing that from the start.
And that's a good illustration. And I was actually going to use something else about that mere mortals like you and I do, and you do very well, which is you have a structure.
Yes.
In terms of with your coaching, which you teach. So you have, your step by step, which again is, if you like, it's your meta model for your coaching.
Yes.
And so
but only for the beginning, only for starting up.
Starting, yeah. So this is what Richard was laying out. He was almost like laying out his meta position, his meta.
Right.
I don't want to say meta model because it's confusing with the meta model, but that's what I mean in terms of
meta strategy to help
the meta
people.
Strategy, yeah. So I wanted to do this. So I was thinking about that, and I thought, okay, so how do we know which questions to ask and when in terms of learning?
Right.
The context here being learning rather than therapy. Although for me, a coaching session is just a one-to-one learning session. It's about learning.
I always say the people I train as a coach are one-on-one trainers.
Yeah, right. That's right. So every situation has the opportunity, as I've said before, of a learning situation. Otherwise, you're sitting there, unless you're. Lily likes your very good model, because this is a very good model.
Yeah, of course, Lily is using it.
She likes.
Huh?
It's a lovely model. Yes, it's a very good model, Lily. Thank you.
Yes, I also agree with Lily.
Of course. So I thought about that in terms of questioning. We have all these strategies, and there's books and books and books written on how to ask questions, what questions, and all that stuff. We've got the meta model. We've got very basic models like, who, where, what, where, when, and how questions. That
right.
When do we know what to ask and for what reason? So I wanted to start with being purposeful about questions. And thinking about, why we do it, because we waste huge. This is the thing I learned from Richard. Right, we waste massive amounts of time if we don't think about what the question is for.
Right.
In the first place. And I got some fantastic statistics here, which I thought, because I know you like statistics.
Statistics, yes. Who doesn't like
I'll get some statistics out for yours today.
Good.
So this is based on teachers, but it'd be interesting to see how it compares with coaches or whatever. That teachers ask up to 2 questions every minute.
Right.
That's 400 in a day, 70,000 questions in a year, and it amounts to 2 to 3 million questions over the course of a career.
Right, but I'm taking it that those are not all unique questions. Those are repeat questions.
Well, if we analyse what sort of questions they are,
we're not going to
most of them are just really functional questions, like, have you finished yet?
Right.
Where's your coat? Where's your homework? What have you done with it? Or rhetorical questions. Can you please be quiet now? Yes. So a lot of the questions are, as you say, repetitive, not thought through in terms of what the purpose is in terms of learning. And they're to do with, if you like, functioning. They're not about learning, and they're not much about what's going on in somebody's head. So for me, questions for learning are about, how do I make sure that I send the person inside their head to do something useful? In the same way as in the coaching session, we ask a question to send somebody inside their head to make some useful change in their thinking.
Right.
So you can say the same thing about learning. We want to send somebody inside to do something useful to change the way that they're learning. And I think Lily might agree with me on this, because she does a lot of work with kids. And I think that it's particularly important now, because it seems to me we're not teaching thinking skills in, post about 12. And and certainly I'm not sure we're teaching thinking skills in secondary schools. And I'm not sure we're teaching thinking skills even at university level.
Right.
In a lot of subjects, at undergraduate at least.
Yeah. Well, philosophy, it's kind of part of the curriculum.
Well, yeah, and that is actually a whole load of things. That's why I thought you'd like this session, although you've probably got a lot to say about it, because
I don't know.
It's about questioning is a big thing, really, and taking a philosopher on about questions is quite an interesting challenge.
Yeah.
So I wanted to say, and I just wanted to start off really today and look at the reasons that we have for asking questions of people, which then should determine the nature of the question we ask. And if we use that's our meta position, if you like, our questioning about questions is what we're doing. So we're questing about questions today.
Yes.
So we're not necessarily drilling down into the detail. We will do that in another session. But this is about what is it we're trying to achieve. So can I have my first slide, please?
Yes, you can. But first, I'm going to show off with the English version.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, that's brilliant.
And then
I highly recommend this model to focus, especially if you like details and you need and maybe you can make it a bit bigger on the screen.
Yeah, I know. I can make it bigger, but then it will be a half. How I say? No, I completely lost myself. Let's go back. Oh, that was a Dutch one. Oh.
I just think I need to make this whole screen. Yeah, that's better. I can see that better now.
And there's a logic to it, because we start in the heart of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, is the TOTI model: test, operate, test, exit. From there you go to strategy, and then so you can actually see what we're doing. So we're doing a TOTI model strategy in communications with regard to the meta model, and so you can actually trace our way through this model to see what we're doing now.
Yeah, and I think that's really useful, because quite often people start on the outer ring and work in their learning.
That's actually what's the best way to learn neurolinguistic programming. Is going from the outside in rather than from the inside out. But
who says? Who says that's the best way to learn it?
Maybe I don't know whether it's the best way, but at least it is the most common way.
It is the most common way. Absolutely, it is.
But I do think that it has because if you start with the TOTI model, it is very theoretical, and you do want to have your students to have something concrete to do straight away.
Well, except that if you look at, this is another question for another day, and maybe we'll come back to this, because I think this model that you've done would be really interesting to look at alongside Cobb's learning cycle, because where you would start with the learning would depend on what that preference or where that person was at the time. So, for example, a student who comes in and goes, "Why are we doing this?"
Mm-hmm.
Is not going to be satisfied by that detail around the edges. But if you start with the tone and say, "Oh, this is about how we make decisions, test, operate, test, exit, and explain," they'll go, "Okay."
Yes.
So it depends on the nature of the position of the learner as to where would be best to start. We have to always make a good call on that, because if we're teaching a group, we can't start all over the place.
Right.
Necessarily.
But there's also a question from Yvonne, by the way. Change is to influence the mind. What about the language of the body?
Okay, yeah. I mean, we read people's body language a lot of the time to tell us whether or not our questions are the right ones. And the way somebody responds physically to a question will tell you a lot about whether or not you've hit the mark or not, or you're moving in the right direction, or whether it's too challenging a question, or it's too easy a question, or they're not ready for it yet. So yeah, that's the body language is part of your feedback mechanism to know whether or not you're going in the right direction, I would say. What do you think, Joost?
Yes, but I'm not sure whether that's exactly what you meant.
Okay. What did you mean then?
That's just my mind reading. I thought more about the stuff that Edie Perry does, we have Lily online. So Lily has a website. Let's see if I can dig it up very quickly. Where she does.
Yes, Lily's body working is fabulous.
Yes.
But gave me some very good tips for my knee last time I was in Amsterdam.
Okay, so I have her Feldenkrais website page. Maybe she can put it in her own web page in the chat. But that is more about what Moshe Feldenkrais did, and when he approached Richard in the 70s about saying, "Well, what you do with hypnosis to the mind is what I do to the body." So my guess was that maybe she would mean that. But
okay, now I know it was that. It was our Lily. That Lily. Then you're probably right.
Het is soepel, pijnvrij bewegen. Het is subtle, difficult to translate, but at least move without pain. So we have two answers. I also agree with your answer that indeed the body language is a great, a great feedback mechanism to see how your communications or your questioning is going.
Yeah. Okay, so
let's go on the mystery tour, because I'm baffled.
Okay, so we'll have this up for a minute, and then we can take it down so that we can talk properly. But because otherwise we'll have a slide up all the time. People I know take screenshots of it. So once you've got a screenshot of it, you don't need it up there. You can just talk. So literally questions in a. Oh, wait a minute.
Another remark was for the previous, just to mess things up. Let's get it back on screen. Why is it not there? I always wondered where to fit in the bits of the puzzle we've learned so far. Very helpful to know we learn outside, ring inwards, but in practice you work center outwards. Well, yay!
Yeah, well done. Yeah, absolutely. Quite right.
Now, there are even further questions by Yvonne. For example, Joost has 2 questions in the interview that are physical for the type 8 brain type. So this is not, there's not even, there's a third interpretation of her question, and there's of course the one that she meant, is where you use, where you question by moving a physical. So we, for instance, to test someone whether he's a type 8 brain type, we push them, and then that is as taken as a question. So maybe you, can we include physical questions in your scheme?
Yeah,
or
but this, yes, you can. But I have something to say about this, because that question. So in a way, what that question has raised is, which is quite important, is the very first question, even before this slide really, is who are we asking the question for? So in that situation, having a physical question, if you like, is actually at that point to help the practitioner, in your case, to elicit which neurogram type a person is. It's not really for anything to do with learning for the person at that stage. So one of the things that I want to say first is to draw a distinction between questions that we're asking to elicit information for ourselves, which might be the who, what, where, when type questions, or what we're gathering information for ourselves for a particular purpose, as in coaching, or when we're asking questions to promote learning. And so we're often quite muddled about that. And in coaching sessions, particularly, there's that thing about the Pinocchio syndrome. Are you asking that question because you're just generally quite nosy? But not Pinocchio, that's not right. Nosy because you're nosy. And you want more information.
That's one of the reasons why I'm such a good coach. I really am not interested in my clients at all.
So, or are you asking the questions in this context to promote learning? So questions should literally provoke thought.
Right.
So that's my premise for the model for questioning, if you like. That the first
in
question
the context
you ask
of learning.
yourself, is this question going to provoke thought,
right,
thinking? And if it's not, why are you asking it? You're wasting your breath in this context, in this learning context.
Yes.
So that's the very first question. And most of the time with questions, I've forgotten to say, because I got distracted with your model.
Yes.
I wanted to say that I thought this is particularly important at this time, because there's so much stuff knocking about around fake news and people believing stuff without actually having a structure for challenging what they're being exposed to. So not only is this a useful model for people to use when they're teaching or coaching or training other people, but also for yourself to be able to actually ask yourselves these questions when you're evaluating something that somebody else is putting out as the truth.
And how do you feel about, because all these, I call them conspiracy nutcases, they always claim, well, I'm not claiming anything, I'm just asking questions.
Yeah, well, they're entitled to ask questions, and that's fine.
Those are very rhetorical questions. They
can be very rhetorical questions, yeah. And I'm not going to enter into debate about the conspiracy theories. What I'm trying to get people to do here is to use a structure that will enable them not to be drawn into something, or to be, to be able to evaluate for themselves. I'm not saying what conclusion they come to. In a more grown up and educated way than we're seeing out there on in the ether at the moment.
Right.
We're seeing lots of people getting very angry. There was a time when one of the definitions of being educated was to be able to debate without getting emotional and upset about it, to actually have a discussion about different points of view, whereby we're not upset. We're just going, okay, well, we're disagreeing on this. Let's have a proper debate. As Mrs. Merton used to say, let's have an interesting debate.
Right.
This is something to do with your students, with your clients, if you're coaching them to enable them to learn more about their thought processes as a trainer, or for yourself when you're questing to learn new information for yourselves. And lots of people are learning online now, and there is no filters for whether or not what they're being told is of any value, relevance, or of validity. So this process is something that people can do to make sure that they're building rigor into their own thinking.
Right.
So this is the sort of beginnings of the model anyway. Yeah. We're only halfway through and we're just starting looking at the model. I love our conversation shows. They go all over the place. So the premise, the big thing is how to provoke thought. Most of our learning starts off on a very superficial or surface level.
Right.
And it's almost like the opposite of drilling. We talk about surface experience, which we're sharing in NLP. We talk about people say, so I say, I went to the shops. That's a very superficial and surface level. Yeah. And I want to drill down to find out what the deeper experience is. And it's the same with learning. People learn access superficially on surface level. It's a good place to start. Just a good overview at a surface level is a good place to start. So you want to then get people to drill down to deeper learning. And what does that mean? So it means that we need to be asking questions that have a purpose first. So
you're not asking for the purpose, but you have purposeful questions.
Yeah, so it's not asking for the purpose of the question. It has to have a purpose. So in a way it's what is it you're asking it for? What do you want this person to gain from this?
Yes, but
so for example, you might say
it's the purpose of the questionnaire, not the person being questioned.
No, at this point, it's you. This is about you. What question are you? All of this is about what question are you going to ask?
Exactly.
In order to achieve something or to enable the person to achieve something. Yes. So the first is to actually do so purposefully. So with a purpose. So what do you want the person to do? So I'll give you an example. For example, do you want them to engage logically? Or do you want them to engage with their emotions about it? For example, right? So the nature of the question would change. So obviously, if you wanted somebody to engage emotionally, but you'd say something like, well, how does that make you feel?
Right.
But also,
what all the TV reporters do constantly. They want
exactly.
They want emotions.
Because they want the
how much pain are you right now?
But if it's useful for the learner to engage with their emotions in that situation, then you want to ask that.
Right.
So, for example, if you're looking at, if you're teaching something about caring for other people, quite important to engage people's emotions and have a conversation about, get them to think about how they feel. But other times, you want people to keep out of their emotions so that they can evaluate things more logically.
Right.
So you might ask a question. You might want to link that the purpose of this learning to other things that they've learned before. So you might ask, well, how does this relate to what you were doing last week? This is an important type of question to ask for generative learning. There's a big thing knocking around now. I don't know how it is in Dutch, but the English inspection, the UK Education Inspection Service has suddenly discovered generative learning, apparently. But generative learning is way too big a word for them. So they're calling it sticky learning.
Yes.
Which isn't the same thing in my book, but that's what they've chosen as a jargon for it. And what they're trying to do, and what they're trying to get to, is teachers to recognize that if learning is to be put into the long-term memory and utilized in the future, it needs to be connected past and future to other things, which we've known in NLP forever. They've just woken up to this. So it might be that we want to say, okay, so I'm going to ask a question that explores the purpose of learning this for the student.
Right.
Because that is a question that students ask all the time and people ignore. Like the question goes like this: what are we doing this for? It's a purpose question and deserves to be explored. How does this connect to what we were doing last year or last week? Or how do you think this will connect to your future doing this or whatever? So it's a connecting up question.
It's the question that always comes up when you're doing submodalities exercises in the prep course. Why are we doing this?
Why are we doing this? Exactly. And it's a very valid question. And we need to then, when we hear that question, ask a question back that enables the student to connect that to other things. Sometimes it might be just in that case, because we're teaching such small chunks, is the best advice is just to hang on and wait a while.
Yeah, I'll always explain it as this is a piece of the puzzle and we're going to use it for bigger, better things later on.
Yes, yeah. But it's a valid question. And maybe then when it comes to the next later on stage, it's important that you, as the trainer, ask that student a question, purpose question, that links it back to the submodality works.
Yes.
Well, how do you think what we're doing now connects back to what we did on the submodality work yesterday?
Exactly, yes. But I already, because we already done the spinning feeling technique and the fast phobia cure, so I always explain also, okay, if you now look back at how we did those techniques, then you can see where actually what we did was changing submodalities. So that's why you need to learn about submodalities.
Yeah, but that's you giving an explanation. I'm not talking about you giving an explanation here. I'm talking about driving thinking.
Okay.
So is it better, Jos, that you ask a question that enables a student to make that link for themselves? Or is
in fact, I do. In fact, when I explain it, I do say, okay, does this remind you of something that we already did in the course?
Okay, yeah. So that's a good question. What does this remind you of? How does this remind you of something we've done already? That sends people on a purposeful quest.
Yes.
That makes sense. So we might ask questions about purpose. We might ask questions about complexity. These are all like subcategories that we can think about what type of question we're going to ask. So we might want to ask about complexity. These are questions that drive the thinking to investigate more. So you might ask a question like, will this always be true or will there be exceptions?
Okay, you're not asking, are you smart enough to understand this?
No.
Okay.
No, you're
just complexity. Everything is too complex that I do.
Yeah, we all know that, Jos. So yeah,
Yes.
but it's partly to do with how you ask the questions. So sometimes people will come along with a very simple thing. I don't know. I'm trying to think of an example at the top of my head, but I can't right now. But if I sort of said, it always rains on Tuesdays.
Right.
Okay. Or, which we would tackle as a generalization in an NLP sense. But if that was in a learning context, you then ask the question, does it always rain on Tuesdays or are there exceptions to this? You'd have to go and look at the weather forecast, previous weather forecast, to discover that there are exceptions to it raining on Tuesdays. Although if we live where I live, I don't think that's true, actually. I think it always rains on Tuesdays.
Right.
But it's about complexity. So when people are doing that surface level scratch on the surface, we want to drive their learning deeper into more complexity.
Right.
And
there's a remark, but the remark is in Dutch, so I'll translate.
Yeah, translate it, please.
Hi, Jean. Good that you are here. She's actually one of my students, and she was actually at the course last week where we did the submodalities exercise. And she said we did the submodalities exercise during the training program last week on Monday. And I'm still surprised / confused. I'm not sure which translation is best at it. What of the impact these exercises had on me. Yes, so hopefully Jean has recovered by now from the exercise, and but she's still impressed by it. That's a good thing, hopefully.
And she's up for more. And this rather
Hopefully.
complex, this is a slightly more complex model that for my usual keep everything very simple. It is actually quite simple. You try and make it harder and more complicated, Jos, than it is, but it's just a set of steps. So
she says the version is amazement.
Amazement, right? Amazement. Well, that's a good word to use about learning.
I'm not sure. I know what happened. We were installing other people's confusion in them, and she got really confused.
That's an exercise. That is an exercise that is done on most practitioners' courses, and I never do that on because I think it's starting a practitioner is confusing at the best of times without installing further. I remember people doing that to me, and I spent days in that state. It didn't help at all.
Yeah. So, well, this is day 7. So.
Oh well, that's still not forgiven. Okay, so purpose. What's the purpose? Why are we doing it? Questions around that. Complexity. So
can I make an example, or let's just say it's a check to see if I understood it?
Yeah.
If I ask my students, can you make this more simple? That would be a question about complexity.
It could be, but but sometimes I don't know, Joost. It would depend. What I'm looking at here is if you have people who if you look at the way we teach physics, for example, you take a subject like physics, and we're looking at we often teach a better example. So we teach a particular subject to a certain group at that amount of it, if you like, that bandwidth. But actually, there's this much bandwidth.
Come again. I was
this bit.
Distracted. Go again.
And so we want well, so we're just teaching the surface often, and we want students to go down and explore more. So if you think about something like physics, we might teach mechanics, but then we've got all that quantum stuff to explore.
Right.
And how do you get people to shift into, if you feel like, the quantumness of a subject? So you do that by asking questions about complexity.
Right. You want to increase the complexity.
You want to increase the amount of detail and complexity in their learning. So rather than making very simplistic conclusions about something,
okay,
they begin to explore more detail and more nuance about a subject. Remember, this is all about provoking thought.
Yes.
In the other person. Now, one of the great challenges that I've often set my students, which is based on the work of Julie Olson, our colleague Julie Olson.
Yes, Julie.
Pardon?
Yes, Julie. I know
Julie, yeah. So one of the things that Julie does exquisitely is she does it quite often. She teaches the session on questioning by only asking questions.
Right.
So everything that comes at her, she turns back as a question. So very, very skillful. It's a great exercise for teachers and trainers to do, because it expands your ability to ask questions. Just say to yourself, for the next half an hour, I'm going to do nothing but ask the students the questions. And actually what happens is in that half an hour, the learning is significantly deeper than if the trainer is just telling them the answers, telling them.
It sounds a bit like I'm trying to create techno music with all kind of ways, and not getting very good at it at all. But one of the online guides on YouTube said, well, just take one sound, basically a very basic sound like and just see if you can create all the different instruments out of that one sound. And
Yeah.
I know it's possible because he says the software that you have can do it, but then you learn everything that the software is able to do if you just try to create all the sounds from one basic sound.
Have you done it yet?
No, it sounds too complex to me.
Okay. So let's move on, because we don't have to. This is just a big model. If we get too much into the detail of each one, we're in danger of doing that whole thing about missing out on the whole structure of this meta position for questioning.
Right.
So we might want to ask questions for purpose,
or we can spend the next 3 sessions on this model.
We could, yes, quite easily. We might want to ask questions about that get the student to think about more complexity. We might ask them, this will be more familiar for most people, to questions that elicit that encourage them to find out more information. What else could you discover about this subject? What else could you find out about how hair grows, or whatever it is? So there are questions about information.
There's a question. Can you give an example, Kate? Questioning and tuning it into another question.
How would you like me to do that, Lily?
Yeah. And what would you want to learn out of it?
There you are. There's 2 examples, Lily.
What would be the purpose of it? Why are you coming up with this question right at the end?
No, not why. No, okay, we need to ask a question. That's a good one. Okay, so Lily, let's take Lily as an example. We haven't got very far down my model, but let's say, so what is it would be helpful for Lily to learn in asking this question? Right, so she's asking for some more detail, isn't she? She's asking for detail, an example. She's asking for information.
My mind is asking, how can I answer you in the form of a question?
No, but take a step back from the question and go, what would be useful for Lily to know? Does she simply need an example? In which case, the example, we've given her 3 or 4. Okay. Does she need more information about how to do this for herself? That's an information one. Does she want to know what the implications of this are? Does she want to be able to interpret this? And all of those will determine which question we ask her.
Do you think I'm getting this?
Are you asking me?
I'm just trying to come up with a question to a question.
Really? Are you?
I wouldn't. How would I know?
Well, have you ever been in a situation of knowing something like this before?
No. I have never tried to converse with other persons by only asking questions. This is really first time for me, and it is quite hard. So, Julie, extra kudos to you for being able to do it.
So the other category, so moving on, implication. We might want to ask somebody what's the implications of this knowledge. So they've gained this new information. We might want to ask them what are the implications of this in terms of other things, or what does this mean in relation to other things? Another question. Lily's got loads of questions.
Would you like to, and Lily would like to do it as an exercise to play with, become better in asking purposeful questions?
I think it would be fantastic to do an exercise. We sort of have to get through the model first, Lily. I think we'll just
almost
do a
running
little
out
bit.
of time.
But no, I think that's a really good thing to do. I think that's a really good thing to do, Lily. And I would, I love interaction. It's just this medium doesn't make it great. But I could say, as we go through each one of these, maybe you could put your suggestions up. So what would be a purposeful question? What would be a question that drives complexity? What question gathers more information?
Yes.
What question?
All the participants, all the viewers and who are watching this, put all your sample questions in the chat. We love to see those.
So and then it's, yeah, so we want to be able to interpret that information too. And then there's a few more as well. So do you want to put the next slide up? There are 5 more. So there are 10 of these in total. There are 10 categories of questions where we're thinking what would be helpful for the student. So then the next 5 are going back to my, our conspiracy theory conversation. What would be an alternative point of view? So given the information that we've been provided with today, what alternative view could somebody come up with? And you might sort of say, the sort of questions you might say, if somebody arrived from Mars in this situation right now, what would they think?
Right.
Or, we use the metaphor in law training or in law in English. There's a test for reasonableness, and it's what would the man on the Clapham omnibus decide on this, think about this. So it's like a third position, taking a third position, somebody outside of it. So is there
be better if we spoke about alternative viewpoints? Because I always hate the idea that there are just 2.
Yes, of course.
But there are so many different points of view.
To start with, some learners might decide that because they've been presented with this information, there is only one possible interpretation of this, or one possible view. So to start by thinking about, asking the question, what else could you decide based on this information, helps people to explore alternative views for themselves, and also accept and accept the likelihood of different viewpoints based on the same information.
Yes.
So getting people to move positions and think stops that dogmatic, this is the way it is.
Yes, but the issue that I had was that, especially the conspiracy people, is that they already recognize that there's a mainstream or the official story, and they put their own point of view as the alternative to that. And so then if you say, okay, is there an alternative viewpoint? They will say, yes, of course, that's mine. So if you
I don't rise to that one, as you know, Jos. That's your bag. You can carry on challenging the conspiracy theories. My choice is just to ignore them, or to ignore
perfectly fine. But alternative viewpoints makes clear that
alternative viewpoints are a healthy idea in societies generally, that we can explore, and in a number of different situations. So, for example, in a less scientific, you could sort of take a view. Let's think of something like, there's been how many different theories or explanations for the extinction of the dinosaurs, for example.
Well, there's something that is called the how you translate it to English, the underdetermination of the theory by the data. So any theory is always underdetermined by the data set. You can come up with as many theories as you have time to think of as alternatives to the original theory, because data will never be enough to make sure that there's only one theory left. You can make I hate to say an infinite number of theories, because we don't have infinite time. But as long as you are capable of generating new theories, you can generate new theories on the same data set.
Yes, and that's a very useful skill for people to have, because actually quite often information is presented as with one interpretation, as if that is the truth. And exactly. we saw that with all the data, data overload that we got through COVID.
Yes.
And how that can, and actually, the same data is then interpreted in 2 wildly different ways.
You can even do it with gravity. There is a Dutch scientist who has come up with a completely different way to describe the movement of all these bodies that we now explain by gravity. and doing completely away with gravity, and it is on the same data set. It is a complete explanation of everything. It is based on the idea that the universe doesn't like to move information. So if I jump, I'm going back down because the universe says, now Joost, is a lot of information, it should stay in the same position. But yes, this is very few people understand it, and I'm not claiming to understand it, but I do know that it is a completely as good as an explanation of all the movements that we experience on a micro level and a macro level, and it's completely no gravity in it whatsoever.
Well, I like that. I think that's great. You see, I think that's a great alternative view. It's a great example of an alternative view.
But if you can do it with gravity, that's like gravity. We are so.
But the question here, the issue here, Joost, is that you're quite right. People can if we can do it with gravity, we can do it with anything. But most people don't. Most people are not given the capacity, or we're not training our children and young people for the capacity to accept and create alternative viewpoints.
Exactly.
And for people to say, I love the my favorite thing is Robert Anton Wilson. He says, if you start every sentence with "it seems to me,"
right,
you eliminate so much of the sort of aggression and arguments out of the world, because it just seems to me, and I can go, oh, that's interesting because it seems to me this, or it seems to me that, and then we can accept those views. That's a good learning strategy for all sorts of things, including life.
So there's still a remark by Yvonne about exercises, but it's in Dutch. I'll translate it.
Right.
And so learning by exercising or learning by experience is an exercise. So that in that case, that information is going to be felt through experience.
Can you say that again, please?
So experience-oriented learning is an exercise. In an exercise. Results in that you are going to feel the information through experience.
Okay, yeah, I get what you're saying. So, yeah, I mean, it's this is a very, as we've said before, this is quite an alien format for me, because I would be, if we were in a classroom doing this, we would be taking each of these and having a go ourselves. We might even be starting with a whole load of questions and then categorizing them. Right. So I'm a great believer in having the student learn rather than me teach, as you know, Jos. That's my premise. It's also easier, I think, but but you're quite right. The other part of that question was, or there's that statement rather, was about feeling. So there's and it isn't just about feeling. Yes, you're right that people feel the experience, and so they have the experience, so they have a more of a kinesthetic response to it, which is, what this format lacks often is to generate the kinesthetics in the same way as when we're actively learning stuff. But it's not the only way. Active learning is one way of learning that suits some of us, and not others. And that's one of the reasons why this hour-long format is just about, it's certainly long enough any longer. And I would certainly want people to be doing more stuff and not sitting there listening to you and me prattling on about whatever it is we're doing this particular week.
Yes.
But that's what we're doing. We're testing this model. Maybe we'll come back and look at and do some. Maybe we can set some homework or home play for people to actually have a go at this. Yes. So the other, the other purposes, rationales for asking questions might be, we might want to ask whether or not how this is relevant. So sometimes people can get very, very engrossed in a tiny little bit of something, and you need to be asking the question, well, how is this relevant to everything else that we're doing, or is it relevant? And also because that, rather than focusing on one thing, that helps to build discriminative thinking, thinking with discerning or discriminatory thinking. So deciding how valid it is, how important it is in the great scheme of things, or within this particular subject. And then we also want to we want to ask questions that are about accuracy. this is really important, probably should be further up the list. So if you're interpreting information, or you're looking at any form of information and data, to force a student's thinking into evaluating the accuracy of it is really important.
Yes.
And probably should be higher up the list if I did the list again.
Do you mean with accuracy, the correctness?
Yeah, well, it might be how can you determine that this information is correct? Because people are presented by data, and here, look, I've got this data, and then you say, so how can you can you do to ensure that information is correct? So you have to then go and find other sources and check the references and sources or whatever.
I'm just thinking that 99% of all NLP trainers are highly inaccurate.
But so that's about actually checking sources, testing data. These are skills that we don't teach. We just present data and ask people to comment on it, and then we move on. Yes. And the same linked with accuracy is precision.
Yes.
So exactly how is that right? Precisely, specifically, asking those sorts of precise questions.
Again, submodalities. Last week, we now have these role mates, so people can actually measure how long and high their mental imagery is. We have a whole coordinating system, so they can actually locate all this mental imagery in 3D space. And they're actually measuring. It's like 40 centimeters in front of me, and this is 50 centimeters wide. Because I think that especially if you start to do swish techniques, that swishing becomes so much more powerful when you have a high level of precision.
Yeah, that's right. Because if you're moving a picture from one place to another, you need to know exactly where the picture is to start with.
Exactly.
Because otherwise, if you say the picture's there, and then the person moves it from there, it's not moving the picture.
Exactly.
It has to be precise.
And you have to end up in the same location as where you found the picture. So and the same means highly precise.
And then the final category is logical. Is it logical? So this really relates to cause and effect and meaning. So if X equals Y, how do we know when X equals Y? Under what circumstances will Z equal something else? And all of those questions around the logic, which I'm sure you have thousands of examples of. That promotes evaluation, analysis, and synthesis. All of these are categorizations within Bloom's, but this is about figuring out the purpose first.
Right.
So that's my questioning questions model.
Good. Thank you. And it also reached the hour. So if there are any questions by our lovely viewers, please put them in the chat. Then, next week we are still going to do another one. And then we have a 2-week pause because Kate is busy doing something else.
Mm-hmm.
But next week we will continue with a different topic, or we'll revisit this probably sometimes.
Well, we might carry on with this next week in terms of having a bit more practice at it, because we've got some. Right. But we may just lump together some questions more.
Maybe we can give out some homework for the viewers who are still here.
I think it would be really good if people look at each of these categories for themselves and what we've based on, and think about maybe somebody they work with or themselves, and create questions that drive their learning from the surface level to a deeper level in these 10 categories. And we would love to know what they are.
Yvonne says, yeah. That's Dutch for yeah.
That's good. And then maybe at the beginning of next week, we can have a look at some of them.
Yes. So homework. The homework is create questions based on these 10 points to see if you can come up with 10. Let's make it even, because I am very rigid. Create 10 questions for each of these 10 category 1 questions to create thought-provoking questions to move from surface learning to deep learning, and we'll look into them next week.
All right. See,
Lily says it seems that this was very worthwhile. Jane says really useful. Thank you. Katalina says, can you next time make it practical? And well, hopefully the homework is practical.
It's very difficult to make things practical with Joost because he just interrupts with more questions all of the time.
Yes. If you want practice, come and join our training programs. We can do.
We can always we do. I do like to have a little bit of an exercise, but we only have an hour, so it's nice to set the practice. Oh, there you go. We've got a 9-year-old daughter to practice on. Perfect.
Yes.
A victim. That's always good.
Yes, more on this would be good, says Jane. Excellent.
So okay, again, well, maybe we'll carry on next week because I have more to talk about on this.
Yes, we will.
That I'm working up at the moment.
So, but nevertheless, Orlando is also very happy. Hi, Orlando. Didn't see you yet.
Oh, hi, Orlando. Didn't see you there.
Let me stress it again. This 1 hour is not a complete course with Kate Benson. This is actually teaser material so that you can become very excited and that you want to see Kate live. And seeing Kate live is actually quite possible because she's coming to Amsterdam in September.
Yes, and we're doing Teaching Excellence on the Island in probably November. I'm still waiting for this date, but probably I'm aiming for the first week in November.
So for all the people who want to see Kate live, you can go to the Isle of Wight or to Amsterdam. And because it's a very, very big difference between doing this through Twitch and you can rewatch it on YouTube or on the podcast. And experiencing this training program live, either with Kate or with me or the combination of the both of us. Live training is so much better. We are very good at programming your unconscious mind in a live training setting, and it is very difficult to do through a screen.
Well, especially when we can't see them.
Especially when we can't see them, yes.
Well, but I'm glad everybody's enjoyed it, and it sounds like it went down quite well. So maybe we'll do some more on this next week.
We'll do more questioning next week. And Lily says, yes, Kate live is great fun. So that is good to hear.
That's good to hear, Lily.
Or is it live? Well, it's actually live, but nobody is going to know.
Life is what she meant.
Good. All right. Okay. Thank you very much. Bye, everyone. See you next time, next Tuesday, 1 p.m. Central European Standard Time or noon Greenwich Mean Time. And we'll see Kate again next week. Bye, bye, bye.
Bye, everybody. Bye. Bye, Joost. Thank you for inviting me.